The rain had been falling for hours, turning the quiet street outside the diner into a shimmering mirror of neon lights and lonely reflections. Inside, the soft hum of a coffee machine and the occasional clink of dishes were the only sounds filling the nearly empty room. At the corner booth near the window, a man sat alone with a bowl of soup slowly cooling in front of him. He hadn't taken a bite in several minutes. His eyes were fixed on the rain sliding down the glass like tears. He had come here to eat in silence, just like he had done every night since life had quietly broken him apart. But tonight, something unexpected was about to change everything. Before we continue this story, take a quick moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of compassion, please like this video, share it with someone who might need a little hope today, leave a comment about where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories that remind us how humanity still shines even in the darkest moments. Daniel Carter had never imagined that his life would become so quiet. Once, his house had been full of laughter, music, and the sound of tiny footsteps running across wooden floors. But that was before the accident that took his wife 3 years ago. Since then, everything felt different. The world kept moving forward, but Daniel often felt as though he had been left behind somewhere in the middle of a long, cold winter. Raising his daughter Lily alone had become both his greatest responsibility and his deepest source of strength. Yet on the nights when Lily stayed with her grandmother, the silence in Daniel's life felt almost unbearable. That was why he often came to the same small diner on the edge of town. It wasn't anything special, just red vinyl booths, warm yellow lighting, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee hanging in the air. But the familiarity comforted him. The waitress knew his name. The cook always prepared his soup the same way. It was a place where he could sit without anyone asking too many questions. On this particular night, the rain had driven most people home early. The neon open sign flickered faintly in the window, casting a blue glow over Daniel's tired face. He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. His thoughts wandered back to Lily, her bright smile, the way she hugged him every morning before school, the tiny drawings she left on the kitchen table. She was the only light in his life, but sometimes he worried that he wasn't enough for her. The bell above the diner door jingled softly, pulling Daniel from his thoughts. A woman stepped inside, shaking raindrops from her coat. She looked exhausted, her blonde hair damp from the storm outside. Standing beside her was a small boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, wearing a hooded jacket that looked slightly too big for him. The boy's eyes scanned the diner nervously, as if he wasn't sure whether they were welcome there. Daniel barely noticed them at first. People came and went all the time. But then something caught his attention. The boy's gaze had settled on Daniel's bowl of soup. It wasn't a quick glance. It was the kind of look a hungry child gives food when he hasn't eaten in a long time. Daniel felt a strange heaviness in his chest. The woman walked toward the counter, speaking quietly with the waitress. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he noticed the waitress' expression change. First sympathetic, then apologetic. The woman nodded slowly, as if she had expected the answer already. She turned around, gently taking her son's hand. They began to walk toward the door again. But just before they reached it, the woman hesitated. Her eyes drifted toward Daniel's booth. She looked uncertain, almost embarrassed. For a moment she seemed to debate something internally. Then, with quiet courage, she approached. Daniel straightened slightly as she stopped beside his table. Her voice was soft and tired when she finally spoke. She explained that they had been traveling all day. Their car had broken down a few miles away, and they had walked through the rain hoping to find somewhere warm. She admitted that she didn't have enough money for a full meal tonight, but her son was hungry. She wasn't asking for food, she said quickly, just wondering if they could sit for a little while until the storm slowed down. Daniel looked at the boy. The child stood silently beside his mother, clutching her hand. His cheeks were pale from the cold, but his eyes held a quiet patience that didn't belong to someone so young. Daniel's heart tightened. Without saying much, he gestured to the empty seats across from him. The woman hesitated again, clearly uncomfortable, accepting the offer. But the boy glanced once more at the bowl of soup, and she slowly nodded. They sat down. For a few minutes, none of them spoke. The rain outside tapped gently against the windows while the diner's soft lights wrapped the small table in warmth. Daniel pushed the bowl of soup toward the boy. At first, the child looked up at his mother for permission. When she gave a small nod, he picked up the spoon carefully, almost as if he were afraid the opportunity might disappear if he moved too quickly. The first bite seemed to bring life back into his tired face. Daniel felt something shift inside him. He ordered another bowl from the waitress along with a sandwich and hot chocolate. The woman tried to protest, but Daniel simply shook his head with a faint smile. It had been a long time since he felt like he could do something simple that mattered. As the boy ate, the tension in the room slowly melted away. The woman introduced herself as Rachel. She explained that life hadn't been easy lately. After losing her job months ago, she had been moving from town to town looking for work. The broken car had been the final blow on an already difficult journey, but despite everything, she was determined to keep going for her son. Daniel listened quietly. He understood more than she probably realized. Loss had a way of reshaping people. The boy, whose name was Noah, finished the soup and leaned back with the satisfied exhaustion of someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. The color had returned to his cheeks, and for the first time since entering the diner, he smiled. That smile did something unexpected to Daniel. It reminded him of Lily. Suddenly, the quiet booth didn't feel so lonely anymore. Outside, the rain began to soften. Rachel glanced toward the window, clearly thinking about the long walk they still had ahead of them. But Daniel spoke before she could stand. He asked where their car had broken down. She explained it was a few miles down the highway. Daniel nodded slowly. Then he offered something that surprised even himself. He told her he could drive them there. He had tools in his truck and knew a bit about fixing engines. Maybe it was something simple. Rachel looked stunned by the offer. For a moment, it seemed like she might refuse out of pride. But the exhaustion in her eyes finally gave way to quiet gratitude. They finished their meal together. When they stepped outside, the air smelled fresh from the rain. The neon diner sign buzzed softly above them as Daniel unlocked his truck and hauled. The drive down the dark road was quiet but strangely comfortable. Noah soon fell asleep in the back seat, wrapped in Rachel's coat. When they reached the broken car, Daniel spent nearly 30 minutes under the hood, illuminated only by the beam of his phone flashlight. Finally, he closed the hood with a small smile. It wasn't a major problem, just a loose connection and a drained battery. With a quick jump start from his truck, the engine roared back to life. Rachel looked as if she might cry. But the moment that truly changed everything came when Noah woke up and climbed out of the truck. He walked straight toward Daniel and wrapped his small arms around the man's waist in a sudden silent hug. Daniel froze for a second. Then he gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. It had been a long time since someone outside his own family had shown him that kind of trust. Rachel thanked him more times than he could count before they finally prepared to leave. As their car pulled away into the night, Daniel stood by his truck watching the taillights disappear down the road. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel so heavy, because sometimes the smallest moments of kindness can heal wounds we didn't even realize were still open. And sometimes the people who ask for help end up giving us something even greater in return. Before this story comes to its final moment, we have a special request for you. In the comments, write the word kindnesses if you believe one small act can change someone's entire day or even their life. Months later, on another quiet evening, Daniel returned to the same diner booth. But this time, he wasn't alone. Across from him sat Rachel and Noah, smiling warmly as Lily excitedly showed them one of her colorful drawings. The waitress watched from the counter with a knowing smile. Because sometimes the people we meet during the darkest nights become the ones who bring light back into our lives. And if this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes the world still needs compassion, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us that kindness is never wasted. Because somewhere out there tonight, someone might just need a warm seat at a small diner table and a stranger willing to say, "Stay a while, Red." The rain had stopped by the time Daniel drove home that night, but something inside him still felt stirred, like the echo of a moment that refused to fade. The road was quiet, and the headlights of his truck cut through the darkness as he replayed the evening in his mind again and again. and again. It had been such a small thing, just a bowl of soup, a warm seat in a diner, a short drive to fix a broken car. Yet somehow it felt much bigger than that. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with coffee or the heater in his truck. It was the feeling of being needed again. When he finally walked into his house, the silence greeted him as it always did. The living room lamp was still on, casting a soft glow over the framed photographs on the wall. One photo in particular always caught his attention, the picture of him, his late wife Emily, and their daughter Lily at the beach years ago. Emily's laughter had been captured in that moment, her hair blowing wildly in the ocean wind while Lily clung to her shoulders. Daniel paused in front of the frame longer than usual that night. For the first time since Emily's passing, he felt something that wasn't grief when he looked at her smile. Emily used to say that kindness had a way of finding its way back to you. Daniel had never fully understood what she meant. Life had been busy then, full of routines and responsibilities, and he had assumed kindness was simply part of being a decent person. But after losing her, after watching the world become colder and quieter, he had slowly forgotten that part of himself. Until tonight. The next morning, Lily came bouncing down the stairs, her backpack swinging and her bright energy filling the kitchen. She immediately noticed the small smile on her father's face as he made breakfast. Children have a way of sensing things adults cannot hide. She asked what had happened, and Daniel told her about the woman and her son he had met at the diner. Lily listened with wide, curious eyes while chewing her toast. When he finished, she simply nodded and said something that lingered in his mind the entire day. She said that maybe they needed help just like he once needed help when Mommy went to heaven. It was the kind of honest wisdom only a child could deliver so simply. Days passed and life returned to its usual rhythm: work, school, quiet dinners, bedtime stories. Daniel assumed that Rachel and Noah had continued their journey somewhere far away. Perhaps they had found work in another town, maybe even a fresh start somewhere warmer. The world was full of people passing through each other's lives without ever crossing paths again. Yet every time Daniel stopped by the diner, he found himself glancing at the door, half expecting the bell to ring and the familiar pair to walk inside again. 3 weeks later, on a chilly afternoon, something unexpected happened. Daniel had just finished picking Lily up from school when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Normally he would have ignored it, but something told him to answer. The voice on the other end was hesitant, but unmistakable. It was Rachel Eagle. She explained that after their car had been repaired that night, they had managed to reach the next town. A small auto repair shop owner had taken pity on them and allowed Rachel to work temporarily cleaning the office and organizing paperwork. It wasn't glamorous work, but it had given them a roof over their heads and enough money to survive. Then something even better had happened. The shop owner had recommended her to a nearby logistics company that needed someone reliable to handle scheduling and office coordination. Rachel had applied, and to her surprise, she had been hired. But that wasn't the real reason she had called. The company she now worked for had recently opened a branch in Daniel's town. Rachel and Noah were moving there that very week. Daniel felt a strange rush of emotion when he heard the news. It wasn't excitement exactly, but it was close. A sense of connection, maybe. The kind that forms when two people meet during a moment of vulnerability and recognize something familiar in each other's struggles. A few days later, the bell above the diner door rang again on another rainy evening. Bo. Daniel looked up from his coffee. Standing there were Rachel and Noah. Noah immediately recognized him and broke into a wide grin, the same smile that had warmed the diner weeks earlier. Rachel looked healthier now, more rested, but the gratitude in her eyes had not changed. This time they didn't need to ask if they could stay a while. They simply walked over and sat down. What followed over the next few months was something none of them had expected. A quiet friendship began to grow. Sometimes they met at the diner. Other times they gathered at Daniel's house, where Lily and Noah would sit on the living room floor building castles from toy blocks or drawing pictures together. The children formed a bond that seemed effortless, as if they had known each other far longer than they actually had. Rachel slowly rebuilt her life piece by piece. The job turned out to be stable and her confidence began to return. Daniel found himself admiring her determination. She had faced hardship with the same quiet strength he had once seen in Emily. For Daniel, the change was deeper than he realized at first. The house that once felt hollow began to fill with sound again. Laughter, conversations, the occasional chaos of children arguing over crayons. Even the neighbors noticed the difference. Daniel no longer walked through life with the same heaviness in his shoulders. One evening, months after that first rainy night in the diner, they all returned to the same booth where the story had begun. Lily excitedly spread her newest drawing across the table. It showed 4 stick figures standing under a bright yellow sun. When Daniel asked who they were, she explained it in the simplest way possible. She said it was their family. Rachel looked surprised by the comment, but she didn't correct the child. Instead, she simply smiled. Daniel realized something important in that moment. Life rarely heals us in grand, dramatic ways. More often, healing happens quietly through shared meals, small acts of kindness, and unexpected friendships that grow slowly over time. And it all started with a single question spoken by a tired mother on a rainy night. "My son's hungry. Can we stay a while?" Before this story comes to its final words, we have one more special request for you. If this journey has touched your heart, write a "Kindness Lives" in the comments below. Your message might inspire someone else who needs to believe that compassion still exists in this world. Daniel once believed that the diner booth was just a place where lonely people came to eat in silence. But now he understood something very different. Sometimes a lonely table becomes the place where new beginnings quietly unfold. And if this story moved you even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes that small acts of kindness can change lives, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us the world is still full of hope. Because somewhere tonight, someone might walk into a quiet diner feeling lost, and all it takes is one kind stranger to say, "You don't have to leave. Stay a while. Red."